folks, welcome back to My Kitten Reads. I'm Eleanor and this is my September reading wrap up. Sorry it's been a couple of weeks. I went to Melbourne for the ice hockey, the NHL, which came to Melbourne to the southern hemisphere for the first time. And by the time I got home on Sunday, I was just tired and didn't have the energy to record. And then I had a long weekend, this weekend just gone, intended to record, just didn't get around to it because of other things and because of studying and because honestly I was tired, because I've just also completed September, in which I did hit my goal of getting at least 10,000 steps every single day of the month, which actually did lead to some reading because I spent a lot of time at the gym on the treadmill. But also a lot of that reading was stuff that I didn't include. I probably read far more Austen variations than I've put down in here, but some of them I just got bored and didn't finish, all that kind of stuff, and some of them I just didn't feel like including because they were rereads and stuff. So, you know, it depended on my mood. So for September I only read 7 things, which has put me a little bit behind. I started a lot of things. And what I did read, I'm actually quite pleased with. But yes, I started a lot of things which I haven't yet finished. So yeah, hopefully some of those will be finished soon. But what I did read, like I said, I was pleased with. So I started the month by actually checking the Hugo list for this year, because I'm not actually a member this year. I kind of forgot about it. And then I was kind of like, I don't have strong opinions about it being in China, but also I'm aware there's a lot of political stuff going on right now that I'm not entirely comfortable with. And I just haven't been in the headspace this year. So I'll probably read around again next year, but I still wanted to look at the Hugo list and try and read some of it. And in the end, I only actually read one thing from it, but it sort of kicked off a bit of stuff. So I read Into the Riverlands by Nevo. So this is the third in Nevo's Singing Hells cycle of novellas, which I absolutely love. This is the cycle of novellas which is about the travelling agendered cleric who records history, records stories, records knowledge with a sort of mystical bird companion, talking bird companion, Anishin. I'm not entirely sure how it's pronounced. But anyway, so this was the third one, Into the Riverlands, and essentially they were going into quite a dangerous area, and the quickest way ended up being to walk with companions who told stories about the various martial artists and bandits and stuff from the history of the Riverlands, which is quite interesting, and lots of different perspectives on particularly female fighters and the whole idea of beauty and ugliness when applied to female warriors, and why certain female warriors don't get talked about as much as others. So it was very interesting and very enjoyable, and I liked it. It also I count it as major queer character because agender. They use they, them pronouns. And Nevo is of, don't quote me, I think some sort of South Asian descent, maybe Vietnamese, I'm not sure, but person of colour. So then I picked up issue 49 of Uncanny Magazine, and the key thing for issue 49 is that there was a short story that made me damn near cry on the treadmill. So that was Rabbit Test by Samantha Mills. This moved me so much. I wasn't outright sobbing, but I was pretty teary sort of in my eyes towards the end of it. So this is a story which is essentially an exploration of the past, the present, and the future of abortion, of people legislating women's reproductive health, of the methods used by women in various different eras to try and control their own reproductive health, and the consequences of using those methods. So there was stuff set sort of present-ish day. There was a lot of stuff way back in the past, like going right back to like early medieval kind of times, like pennyroyal tea in like, and like herbs, like it mentioned Hildegard of Bingen, who was a nun who wrote treatises on like herbs and stuff, I believe. And then it went sort of into the future of sort of probably less than maybe 50, 60 years from now. Something like that, in which, because of sort of various apocalyptic things like climate change and political stuff and everything, the world had swung around again to obsessively legislating against abortion, to the point, literally, when they hit puberty, every single girl has an implant which tracks their cycle. So the government knows when they're late, and their parents know when they're late, and then when they're suddenly not late. So yeah, it was uncomfortable, it was beautiful, it was confronting, it was so moving, about this constant fight women have had just since forever about controlling their own bodies and their own reproductive health. So I really loved that. So that was good. Then I read a new Shana Grandison Pride and Prejudice variation called The First Mrs. Darcy, which essentially, the day after Darcy proposes and is rejected by Elizabeth, his cousin Anne de Bourgh approaches him, soothes him, and says, "Would you marry me, because I've got less than a year to live, and I want to will my estate to my cousin Richard, but my mother has tricked me into signing something that says I can't, but my father's will actually supersede anything that I've signed." So, and her father's will was like, when she marries, it belongs to her husband. So then Darcy could give it to Richard. So, and she says she'll help him rehabilitate himself with Elizabeth as well, because they're not going to be married for long. So yeah, that was quite an interesting take on things. I quite enjoyed it. Then I picked up The Book of Gems by Fran Wilde, which I hadn't realised this had come out in June, but it's the third book in her Gem World series of short stories and novellas. I love the Gem World stories. I realised while reading it, it's been so long since I read the first two that I actually was having difficulty making connections to previous stories. This one is, I believe, set way in the future of the other two, where science has pretty much overtaken gem magic. But there's a scientist whose heritage is from the valley, and her mentor stole her research, went to the valley, went missing, and has been sending some very odd messages back. So she's going to investigate and try and get her work back and figure out what happened. So it's, a lot of it is about academia and the theft of academic work and ideas, but it's also a bit of a magical adventure as well. So that was quite enjoyable. And then Mammoths at the Gate by Nevo came out mid-month, which is the fourth in the Singing Hills cycle. This one was a little sadder. This one was our main character coming home to their monastery for the first time in years to find that most of the monastery had gone off to an archaeological site, which they suddenly had access to. Their friend is there, but their mentor has just died. But their mentor's nieces have turned up and demanded his body, which goes against essentially their faith. And there is a bit of a standoff because their nieces have mammoths, which are dangerous. And so there's a lot in this about grief and about coming home to find out things aren't the way you left them. That people aren't the way that you left them, that you remember them, and having to figure out how to fit yourself back into a space that's not exactly the same shape. So it was really, really good, like all the Skin Heal Cycle books are, but it was a sadder book. That is also, of course, queer and POC. Yay! So at least hit the 2 books of each goal, even though it was with just 2 novellas. But, you know, that's progress. I did start another book by a person of colour, so, you know, and actually got quite a way through it, so doing well. So then I reread, I included one of my variation rereads because I'd only ever read it once before, I think, and that was Don't Flatter Yourself Revisited by Cindy Salia, which starts with at the same point that her Don't Flatter Yourself book starts, with Darcy. Well, essentially it actually starts slightly earlier. So in this version of the story, Elizabeth, who is actually the daughter of an earl, and Mr. Bennet's adopted daughter from his second wife. This time in the first book, Don't Flatter Yourself, she hides that knowledge because she wants to be accepted for herself. This time she actually uses her public persona to sort of influence the way the Bingleys and Mr. Darcy are going to behave in Meryton. So, so it's a twist on her own story. And then the last thing, and the only physical thing that I finished in the month of September, was for university last week, and that is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. This is a very famous novel, science fiction novel from, I think, the 50s. A lot of people would know the story in that this is the novel that the movie Blade Runner was based on. I've never seen Blade Runner either, but I certainly recognised certain elements of the book from a couple of Doctor Who episodes that Russell T Davies wrote. For example, literally the place names New Earth and New York literally come from this, but also the idea of artificial moods being used to control the populace, I guess. So it wasn't quite to my taste. It's sort of interesting on an intellectual level, and I might actually end up doing my essay on it. But not really. It's a bit apocalyptic and dystopian for my taste. But essentially, it's a story where we got to the point somewhere in the 20th century where we had World War Terminus, which was the last World War, and most of the human race that survived the nuclear fallout emigrated off the planet. But a few people are left still living on the planet. Some of them are... fertility is low, and most normal people are encouraged to leave. There are also what are called specials who fall below certain IQ and physical thresholds, who can't leave the planet. And there are androids, because in the colonies off the planet, androids are used as a sort of people of all work. But occasionally they go rogue and they try and slip back onto Earth. And so one of our main characters is a bounty hunter who works for the police force, who retires androids that have been found in the population, aka kills them. And he identifies them through the use of essentially an empathy test. So it's a test of questions and sort of like a lie detector, using involuntary physical things, but it's based around empathy, because research in this world has shown that humans have empathy, whereas androids and animals don't. However, animals are definitely involved because humans are encouraged to own animals where they can, because animals are actually real animals are actually very rare, because of the nuclear fallout that still exists, the dust. But they think that caring for an animal increases a person's empathy. There are also, of course, really realistic android animals, which is what at the start of the story this main character owns, though no one knows it's, except he and his wife know it's actually fake. But he desperately wants a real animal. And there are also empathy boxes. So these are what I found quite interesting and quite similar to the chemical moods in the Doctor Who episode Gridlock, in that the empathy box allows a person to dial in a mood and then experience that mood. So a state of being. So dial in happiness, or dial in depression, or dial in all sorts of, there's hundreds and hundreds of these different things they can dial in. And it's part of what's the religion known as Mercerism. So there's a whole story thread about that. And whether or not, and what this main character often goes into is he starting to feel empathy for the androids he's retiring, particularly the attractive female ones, bit icky. But yeah, so it was kind of interesting, but not quite to my taste. Anyway, so that was the 7th thing that I finished in September. Yeah, it was, so like I said, like overall numbers, it wasn't great, but what I actually read, I was quite pleased with. And like I said, I've got a couple of other books that I did start that I'm pleased that I'm actually picking up some science fiction and fantasy, and some more diverse reading as well, other than what I've been doing. So hopefully this month, October, goes a bit better, although I haven't finished anything yet, so I should probably get to move on. Yes, so I'm always happy to discuss these books in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you all again really soon. Bye.